Hey, it's John. Welcome back to the show, and welcome back to the latest edition of the Live Cut. Premise of this series is to talk about live albums that don't get enough love or recognition, or we discuss this very seldom discussed album today. Let me introduce you to my distinguished guest. You no doubt know him from his wonderful YouTube channel, Tim's Vinyl Confessions. You may know him from his appearances on a wealth of YouTube channels that talk about music, such as the Contrarians and Sea of Tranquility and Grant's Rock Warehouse. And you may also know him from his appearances with me, and you may know him as a very successful author, talking about a lot of great rock bands, many of whom have not had a book written about them yet. Mr. Tim Durling, welcome to my show.
Oh, thanks, John. Thanks for the intro. That's awesome. Yeah.
You're welcome.
It's glad to be here, and I'm glad that we're talking about this particular album because even here in Canada, it's not a very well-known album, unfortunately. It should be one of the classic live albums.
And I did not know this album exists until Tim suggested it for our program today. This is April Wine with their live album, One for the Road. This was released in 1985 on Aquarius Records. It was not released in the United States. It was only released in Canada. This was recorded during the Animal Grace tour, what was supposedly going to be their farewell tour. Well, we know that's not true because April Wine is still out there, albeit without their fallen leader who passed away, Miles Goodwin. This was recorded in 1984, and this would be right at the tail end of their peak period of popularity here in the United States. The musicians who played on this album are Miles Goodwin on vocals, guitars, keyboards, Steve Lang on bass and backing vocals, Jerry Mercer on drums, Gary Moffett on guitars and backing vocals, and Brian Greenway on guitars and backing vocals and occasional lead vocals. So, Tim, when did you first get acquainted with April Wine's music?
Well, I am in the Maritime provinces of Canada. I'm in New Brunswick, and the cool thing about it is that this area isn't known for producing, uh, worldwide renowned bands, but April Wine is an exception. Miles Goodwin, the late Miles Goodwin, was actually born in Woodstock, New Brunswick, which is my hometown.
Okay.
That's He didn't grow up there. It was a case where his parents were just passing through on their way to just outside of Halifax, Nova Scotia, in a place called Waverley. Nova Scotia is the neighboring province to New Brunswick. New Brunswick is just on the Maine border, so I grew up, right on the U.S. border. Uh, but I was born and raised in Woodstock and went to school and lived there for 20 odd years. But it's a pretty cool little fact for around here. But the band themselves formed in Waverly originally way back in 1969. Different lineup than what's on this album, except for Miles. Although I probably didn't hear them. The first time I can remember hearing April Wine was hearing Just Between You and Me on the radio, which is probably when a lot of people in the States heard them especially if you were 7 years old, like I was. But that's when I first became aware that there was a band called April Wine. It was a few years after that until I really got into the band. But they are an institution here in Canada. And unfortunately, they had a great deal of success in the States, but only really for a couple of years and in other pockets all over the world. But yeah, like you said, Brian Greenway is still leading a version of April Wine today, and they are currently opening for another classic Canadian band that's back out on the road, and that would be Triumph.
Yes.
So yeah. it's a good year for Canadian classic rock. Rush is back out there, and Triumph and April Wine, and yeah. But yeah, I mean, obviously they were, especially here in the Maritimes. I mean, they were hugely popular, right? But actually, Montreal claim, can lay claim to them as well because they weren't getting anywhere in Nova Scotia. They moved to Montreal in 1970. So they're as much a Montreal band as they are a maritime band, but we'll take the credit for them.
Okay. So I heard Just Between You and Me as a single, and I was 10 when that came out in 81. Over time, I heard a little bit of them on classic rock radio, most notably Rock 107, WEZX FM, Scranton, Pennsylvania, the home of rock and roll. They didn't play much April Wine. They played Just Between You and Me, Sign of the Gypsy Queen, I Like to Rock, Roller. That might have been it.
Yeah.
And I later on, I was in a classic rock covers band and I played Just Between You and Me in the band. So that one was a song that always went over well. I didn't know much about them. As I was telling Tim before I hit the record button, I maybe knew 5 songs by April Wine until I started going on YouTube, most notably the Contrarians, and started talking music. And that's when a lot of us were getting me into April Wine. So from this point, I got more into their material. The only albums I have are probably their biggest albums in the States, and these are there are 1 CD sets, but I believe there's one half an album on each one. April Wine, we got The Nature of the Beast and Power Play, and then the 2 albums that came before it, In First Glance and Harder, Faster. So that's 90% of my knowledge on April Wine. I have listened to a lot of their other albums, but I don't know them nearly as well as these. So we're going to talk about this album today, what we like about this album, what we may not be so crazy about. Interestingly, one thing that Tim and I were talking about before I hit record was we didn't get a live album here in the United States by April Wine during their heyday here in the States. This was recorded right, would have been at the tail end on the 84 tour, but this never was released in the United States. I had to buy this on eBay. So, Tim, can you go further into that, what we were talking about with this release?
Yeah, so April Wine, I mean, their first album came out in 1971, and I think it only came out in Canada, and they were on Aquarius Records, which was a Canadian, it's kind of an independent label, though Capitol eventually distributed them. Now, the biggest success story other than April Wine in Canada, really the only other one that I could think of that made a dent worldwide was Corey Hart,
Okay.
because Corey Hart's albums were on Aquarius here in Canada. He was on EMI Manhattan, I think, because Aquarius, was all distributed by Capitol ultimately. But April Wine's early material, very eclectic. It's all over the place. Some of it's folky, some of it's hard rock, some of it's got some R&B. It's all over the place. But yeah, once they got to that classic lineup that we're talking about here, and they signed with Capitol in the States in 1978, it was pretty much, if it wasn't quite hard rock, it was getting there.
Yeah.
It was hard rock the way that people would talk about, say, REO Speedwagon or Journey is hard rock. But the difference is that April Wine had a 3 guitar attack. You had Miles Goodwin, Gary Moffat, and Brian Greenway. They could all play rhythm and lead, and they used that. As you know, anybody that's listened to Roller knows they used those 3 guitars to really, really cool advantage and results. And yeah, they're the closest that April Wine came to capitalizing on. My dogs and cats are going crazy behind me here. I'm sorry if
Oh,
they're making
good.
them. I don't know if you can hear that or not, but there's much uh, scrambling going on here.
Only
I've got
seething.
I've got headphones on, so maybe that's killing it.
Yeah, I
Hopefully.
believe that's probably what's going on.
um, so in 1981, with the success, Nature of the Beast was April Wine's biggest album all over the world. It was their only platinum album in the US, sold over 1 million copies, that had Just Between You and Me and Sign of the Gypsy Queen. And you can still usually find that one or hear songs from it. They put out a home video called Live in London, which uh, I think they came out with it just as soon as the album was released, or very shortly after. But it only came out on home video. It wasn't a live album. Some company later on put a CD version out of it, but yeah, it didn't come out, at a time when it would have been made financial sense for Capitol to do so. Um, and what's also interesting, yes, the One for the Road album was so. First Glance was their first Capitol album. It contained Roller, which became a hit almost a year after the album had been out. It had almost been dropped. And now that album, according to RIAA, isn't certified. I have to think it's close to gold, but it's one of those, go back and recertify it would be nice. The Harder Faster album came out late 79. That had I Like to Rock. It had Say Hello. It had their cover of 21st Century Schizoid Man. And that album did very well for them. That eventually went gold in the States in 1982. So that's pretty common album. And you're going to see Harder, Faster, and Nature of the Beast more than any other April Wine album, just about anywhere. In Canada, the only one you see maybe more than that or as much as their album Stand Back from 75, because that was a really big album. And actually, on this live album, they do one of the songs from that album,
Yes.
which we'll get into. Um, After that, they put up Power Play in 82, which sold decently, but it didn't certify. Enough is Enough was a semi-hit single in the States. I think it peaked at 50. It was a bigger
Yes.
hit in Canada. I think it peaked at 11. They did well on that tour. MTV broadcast a tour from, I want to say, Grand Rapids.
Okay.
Um, big place. You can see it on YouTube. Like they were playing big arenas, big places in the US. Sometime in the late 90s, that CD was released of their 1982 concert in Wichita, Kansas on King Biscuit Flower Hour, which I highly recommend because it's a good live album too. But the album itself didn't do as well. And then in 1984, they put out Animal Grace, which only went gold in Canada, and it didn't do very well in the States at all. So their popularity. I mean, at one point they were big enough. I've seen on YouTube, and it's really funny because I don't think of April Wine and MTV in the same breath. But there's a documentary that MTV did on April Wine. That's how big they were at one point in the U.S. And I've always said it's really hard for Canadian bands to, first of all, break into the US and then break and stay there. I mean, for every Bryan Adams and Rush and Loverboy, you've got Coney Hatch and Kim Mitchell and Max Webster and these great bands that just didn't do it. And April Wine did it, but only for a short time. So at that point, um, they went on what they called a farewell tour at the time in 1984, and it was only in Canada. I don't think there were any U.S. dates. It was well attended because, like I said, they've always been a big touring band here. Like you talk to most people, and they've seen April Wine countless times. I've seen them more than any other band, and I didn't start seeing them until '94. I've seen them 5 times, and that most people would put me to shame for the amount of times they've seen them because there was a time like throw a rock, you can go see April Wine somewhere. Uh, but anyway, and that turned into probably an 8-year hiatus. Um, and then in 1985, an album came out called Walking Through Fire, which was essentially Miles Goodwin and Brian Greenway and some studio guys threw a bunch of songs together. I really don't think there's real drums on any of the songs. I think it's drum machines. And they put it's a contractual obligation album. Do I think there's some good songs on it? Yeah, I would love to hear. Like there's good songs underneath the really dated production. But in between that, they recorded a live album. And it's the one we're talking about tonight, which I didn't know existed until I got the April Wine box set, which came out in the early 90s after I'd gotten into the band. And it's basically all of disc 4 on that box set because it's actually their third live album. They put out an album just called Live in Canada in 1974 after 3 albums. And then in 1977, they did Live at the El Macambo, which is a famous club in Toronto that recently reopened. And that album actually did come out in the States. It came out on London Records. And the biggest story behind that album was recorded the week that the Rolling Stones were doing a week of, club shows at the El Macambo under the name The Cockroaches. And April Wine were, the guys that you're going to see April Wine, they were actually the opening act for the Rolling Stones. So that story is bigger than the album that came out of it. And some of that performance came out on the album Love You Live by
Okay.
the Stones. And I think in recent years, that whole El Macambo performance by the Stones has been released. But
It has
anyway,
been. I've seen it out there.
um, but this album, for some reason, even though it does have their best known songs and it's got their best known lineup, it remains an obscure album. I have multiple copies of most of April Wine's albums. I only have four copies altogether of One for the Road. I've got a vinyl copy, which took me forever to find. I've got the CD reissue, and there's only two cassette issues of it, which is rare because some of the April Wine albums, there's like over a dozen different cassette issues of them. So yeah, the first one that came out looked like this, and then Capitol in Canada had this series that came out in the mid to late '80s that all looked like this,
Okay.
and that's it. And that's it. And it wasn't until 2009 that those live albums came out on CD. So that's when this finally came out. I see they changed the cover a little bit. There's no gray in this, but I kind of like it.
Now, does
And
your copy have liner notes?
yes.
Okay, mine.
Well, not much. It's just got this.
Okay, so yeah, same thing as mine. Like you don't
Yeah.
have a booklet or anything, right?
No, no booklet. And there wasn't anything in the vinyl either. It very bare bones. What we know is that it was produced by Miles Goodwin and engineered by Paul Northfield, who would go on to become a very successful producer in his own right.
Now they list. I saw some listings here that Mike Stone was a co-producer. Would that possibly have been maybe on the re-release?
Mike Stone co-produced um, Nature of the Beast, Power Play, and Animal Grace. He had nothing to do with this album.
Okay, okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay. Now on this album, the four albums that sold well in the States, they're the more hard rocking sounds that we really know of April Wine here in the States. Very well represented on here. It takes up probably 80% of the track listing on here.
Yeah.
I was interesting for me is that I saw when doing some research, I also saw that it was in parentheses, it was also called Live in Ottawa. It,
I've
it's
never
not
seen that.
it's not listed on the album itself, but if you go out on the internet to do a little research, it'll say One for the Road, and sometimes it'll say in parentheses Live in Ottawa. So what I was trying to do is figure out what performance this was from Ottawa.
Right.
And there was two set lists from 84 in Ottawa, and one I don't think was complete because it only listed 11 tracks or 12 tracks. The other one was like a 23 song set, and I believe Red Rider opened that night.
Boy, 23 sounds like a long set.
It was
But
long.
but
Yeah.
I do know, I mean, there's at least one medley on here. So maybe they did a couple medleys. I don't know. But
That's
Red Rider opening for them sounds right.
and they replaced Corey Hart. Like Corey Hart couldn't, I guess he was opening on the tour, and
Well,
then
then he became huge,
yes,
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, he eclipsed April Wine,
Yeah.
Canada particularly.
Yeah.
Diamond album with Boy in the Box, which I
Yeah.
saw. That's insane. What are your favorite tracks on here? Which songs do you think really go over well?
Um, I think that this captures the band. It definitely this lineup at the peak of their powers. I mean, they were still young guys at this point, really all in their, mid 30s. Jerry was a little bit older than the rest of them, but I think that all the songs on here sound really good. So, you know, but like my favorites, one of the things that I love about this album, and I wish there were more songs from it. I love that they do This Could Be the Right One
Yes.
on here. Because I like the Animal Grace album quite a bit, but the production on that album is very dated. It's got that very wet 80s drum sound, almost like a Rick Allen type of drum sound. But like, underneath all that clatter, there are good songs. This could be the right one. Um, I only peaked at like I think 64 in the States. It's got a really weird video. Like money was obviously spent on the video, but it doesn't make a lot of sense. They didn't look like a lot of bands. went from the 70s to the 80s, they didn't do great videos. Or maybe they just didn't have good video directors. The best clips of April Wine are just them playing. But I think it should have been a hit, but it wasn't. Even in Canada, it wasn't that much of a hit. But I wish they'd done a couple more songs from the album that was current instead of having it, be. But I mean, I can't argue with most of the songs on here. There's really nothing that I would take out. I would just add. And that's one thing I like about the CD versions, that the CD that added 4 songs, uh, which was a nice surprise. It was cool enough to get it on CD, but it was even cooler to get these bonus songs. But um, I mean, Just Between You and Me always goes over well. I mean, that was, boy, that song's an early example of a power ballad.
Yes, absolutely.
You know, I mean, there's no acoustic guitar, there's no piano. That's just all electric guitars.
It says.
Um, and as you probably figured out, if you had to play it in a band, it's not as simple as it sounds.
No, it's
There's
not.
borrowed chords in there, and things don't always land where you think they're going to.
Mhm.
I mean, Miles could do a lot with 3 chords. He was just a great, great songwriter. I mean, I Like to Rock is a perennial, always good, and a great live song, the way it goes down. Enough is Enough is one of my favorite songs of theirs. I love the version of Roller on here now. It makes me wonder, like, there's a live version. See, even up here in Canada, Much Music, our video channel, didn't play a lot of April Wine because by the time Much Music went on the air, it was 84.
Okay.
So you usually only saw them on like backtracks or shows that played older videos, but every once in a while they'd have a spotlight, which is where they'd have at 3 o'clock every day, they'd have a half hour segment on one particular artist or band.
Okay.
Um, but there is a live version of Roller, and I think it's from this. I mean, and when you see the stage they were using, it was a huge stage. I mean, they were a big band. They played big buildings. They played arenas. They played Maple Leaf Gardens, and I don't know how. I don't think they were a band that like played MSG in the States, but I know they played a lot of arenas. They'd play like big, 8,000 ish people, as headliners. Um, but it makes me wish that this whole thing existed as a home video. And it might. The only other thing I've ever seen from it is the medley of Like a Lover, Coming Right Down on Top of Me, Rock and Roll's a Vicious Game, and Like a Lover, Like a Song. I once caught that entire, so that footage is out there,
Okay.
April Wine's a band whose catalog is mismanaged, unfortunately, for classic rock bands, and it's too bad. I think it'd be kind of a legal mess to try and untangle it. Like,
Probably.
most of these bands you'd see Rock Candy taking the
Yes.
reins, but we haven't really seen that yet. So I don't know. I mean, Unidisc did a pretty good job, but I think they were limited as to what they could do. But it would be nice to see, it would be nice to see a collection of, as bad as some of them are, it'd be nice to see a collection of all their videos in one place
Hmm.
and just fun things like that. Like I said, there's, you can go on YouTube and find that stuff, but it'd be good to get like a cleaned up version. But um, I don't think I answered your question, but I just think that they played these
No, you
songs really, 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 really well. And it's a great document of a great band who kind of walked away at the height of their powers. But I guess, Miles and the rest of the band weren't getting along at the time. Kind of a Twisted Sister situation because Miles wrote the majority of the songs and therefore
yes.
made the majority of the money, and the other guys wanted to get on the songwriting, and it wasn't happening. So, they needed to take a break from each other, I guess, and they came back with some really, really good albums in the years since then. But this is a really good document of this band. Between this one and that King Biscuit Flower Hour one, you really get to hear why this band is, people talk about them because if they saw them in concert, like, yeah, man, they were great. They had 3 lead guitar players, and I love the songs and all of that.
Now, King Biscuit, was that recorded during the Nature to Beast tour, or would that be
No, that was a power play
a
tour.
power play? Okay.
Yeah, it was Wichita, Kansas, and because there's a lot of songs from Power Play on there. They were really pushing that album. That might be an album that was close to hitting gold. I don't know. It might be around 350, 400,000 or something like that because I've heard people say even in the States they see that album quite a lot when they're crate digging.
Hmm. Yeah, based when you look back at their career, maybe that was the album that they were okay. Now we're really going to put the money behind them because we got the momentum growing from Harder, Faster into Nature the Beast. We have a huge hit with Just Between You and Me. Sign of Gypsy Queen was a huge FM hit.
Oh yeah.
So you're thinking that album, it's okay. Now we're gonna go for superstardom here. Didn't quite work out.
Yeah, I think if
Without
Enough is Enough had been a big hit in the States, like it was in Canada, they might have been able to maintain, for another year anyway, another album. And then maybe Animal Grace wouldn't have been coming off of a less successful album. It would have been the next album and people would have been waiting for it.
right,
I think that's the difference. The difference was is that they kept having hits in Canada with Power Play and not in the States, because the other single that got some airplay in Canada was their cover of Tell Me Why by the Beatles.
yes.
They picked really good songs to cover. They weren't always your obvious ones. Most people don't even realize that Sign of the Gypsy Queen is a cover.
I didn't until a few years ago.
And if you hear the original version, Miles almost should have a writing credit on it because he completely transferred. It was a folk song by a
Mhm.
guy named Lawrence Hudd.
Yes,
And you can hear the melody, but he took it and turned it into this rocker, like this powerhouse rocker with all of these dramatic ups and downs. And you know, it's no different in Canada. Sign of the Gypsy Queen is a well-loved song, believe me. What is interesting about this time period is that a friend of mine that I got to know doing the April Wine album episodes on Grant's Rock Warehouse, a guy named Dave Lubin, who's from Montreal. He lives in the
okay.
States now. Is that one thing that he was glad that from following April Wine in Montreal, they were like a local success story once they got really big in the States. But what happened is, as you said, their set list, all of a sudden, all that early material that they always played, most of that got dumped. And it was all like First Glance onward.
Yes.
That changes a little bit on this album. But yeah, he said it was kind of disappointing that you never, you just weren't going to hear those songs. Now, when they got back together in the early 90s, they played from the entire catalog.
When I saw them, I only saw them once, and by that point, Miles passed. I saw them a year and a half ago. They were special guests to Warrant, okay, but they sounded very very good, and it was Brian Greenway was the only guy from the classic lineup left.
Yeah.
They did. You could have been a lady that night.
Oh yeah, that's one of three songs that hit the top 40 in the States. So early on, back in 1972, and that's a cover. That's a Hot Chocolate song.
Hot chocolate cover.
Uh,
Yep.
that hit like 31 in the States. It was on a label called Big Tree Records.
Yes.
But I think it was number two here in Canada. I mean, that's a perennial. You always hear that on the radio. Of their early songs, that's by far the most popular. So that was a top 40 single. Roller was a top 40 single, and Just Between You and Me. Other than that, they had a few that hit the top 100, like I Like to Rock and Gypsy Queen and Enough is Enough. And I think the only other one was This Could Be the Right One.
Okay.
Um,
Yes.
but in Canada, yeah, they had, You Could Have Been a Lady. They had Weeping Widow. Tonight is a Wonderful Time to Fall in Love. You Won't Dance with Me. A song that's on this album, Ooh, What a Night.
Yes.
Their very first single charted in Canada called Fast Train.
Strain.
So that was like when uh, First Glance was their first Capitol album, and I think a lot of people thought they might have been a brand new band. The very next thing to come out in Canada after that was their first greatest hits album because they'd literally they'd had there were 14 songs on there and they were all chart singles.
That's true. Now, I do like how this is sequenced for the most part on here. Interesting that we got Just Between You and Me early, but when I looked at some of their set lists from this tour too, that's something they do more in the first half of the set. This
Yep.
wasn't even though this was a few years after that song became a hit, they didn't like Kicks do with Don't Close Your Eyes. It's right in the early part of the set, maybe the middle part of the set. They don't wait till the end to play the big hit.
Yeah, and that's pretty cool, actually. That just kind of shows that they had, they got enough confidence. Like you're going to want to stick around for this whole show.
Right.
But if there are some of you that just came to hear this song, well, here it is. But Yeah, no, it is interesting because usually when you have a big hit, especially a big hit with a ballad, that's the big, that's the lighter waving moment, right? My puppy just popped up here. Hi,
Okay.
Ellie.
Hey,
Say
buddy.
hi, Ellie. Say hi, Ellie. You're very silly. Yeah, I'm doing a show. There you go. Silly, silly girl. Come on now.
That's all good.
Yeah.
But I do love the medley here of the slower songs, more piano, keyboard based.
Yeah,
Very,
big
very
time.
good. And I mean, and that,
What
yeah, and that's later on in the set, but it works very, very well after we have a whole bunch of rockers.
It's really cool. I love how Miles starts it off. He sits behind this electric piano and he's like, okay, let's see if this thing works.
Right. Yeah.
And so Like a Lover, Like a Song is from The Whole World's Going Crazy, which came out in
Mhm.
76. The funny thing is about that song is it's a big radio song in Canada, and it's usually people point at it as the highlight of that album. It never charted. I don't understand that. It
Hmm.
doesn't make any sense, but it's a beautiful song, beautiful ballad. That's kind of that's the only one I think that's the only one they play all of. So he starts
Yes.
off with Coming Right Down on Top of Me, which is on first glance. It's kind of the slowest song on there because that's a pretty hard charging album all the way through.
Right.
Um, and then Rock and Roll is a Vicious Game, also from first glance. That showcases Brian Greenway on harmonica, which is pretty cool.
It's excellent.
Um, and then they go Like a Lover, Like a Song, which I wonder if that's why Capitol wasn't interested because they actually did dip back prior, although that's usually never mattered before because it's like, well, we own the copyright. And, if somebody really wants to know where that album came from, they can find out, I guess. I don't know. Because The Whole World's Going Crazy did come out in the US. That was one of the ones that came out of London. But they also do Ooh What a Night. And that song has taken an interesting path. So Ooh What a Night is one of the best known April Wine songs here in Canada. You're at a pub somewhere and they're playing music, or if there's a band playing, you hear that ding, 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 da, 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 da. Everybody's like, "Ah." In the States, is there a fire?
Yeah.
It just didn't catch on. That was from Stand Back, their fourth album and their first really big album in Canada. That was a huge album here, actually. But that song was a staple of their set list. And that was originally sung by Jim Clench,
Yes.
who was their second bass player. He was the bass player from the second album through the fifth album. He sang vocal, like he also sang lead vocal occasionally, and he had a really cool voice. Jim, who's since passed away, Jim ended up replacing Randy Bachman in
That's
BTO for
correct.
those last two albums, Rock and Roll Nights and
Street Action.
Street Action. Yeah, yeah. So he's on those albums, and they had a song called Heartaches that
Yes.
was like he sings that, and I think there's a clip of them
That's
on
Fred
American
Turner.
Bandstand. Oh,
That's
Fred sings that?
that's
Okay.
Fred.
I
Yeah.
know that Jim sings the song Rock and Roll Nights.
That's true.
That's him. He's
Yeah.
got a very different voice than Miles. So when he left, they still did One a Night, but on that Live at the El Macombo album, Steve Lang, who replaced Jim on bass, sings it. And it's okay. It's just not quite the same. But by the time you got to the early 80s, something interesting happened because Big Tree Records that issued the second April Wine album, which is self-titled in the States, it was called On Record in Canada, long story, and Stand Back, they were distributed by Atlantic Records. And I have to think this happened in 81 because of the success of Nature of the Beast. You can find vinyl and cassette versions in the US of Stand Back that are on Atlantic Records.
Hmm.
So it was available again. So I think they added it back in. So not only on here on One for the Road, but also on that King Biscuit, you got Miles singing What a Night. So they brought it back in. That song was so big, as far as being influential, that believe it or not, even Garth Brooks talked about going to see April Wine in the early 80s. And they had like the fire alarm going off and the lights were going. He mentions that in particular, and that's got to be the song he's talking about,
It would
which is
have to
pretty,
be.
yeah, which is pretty cool.
Well, that was the thing. I mean, you know, he took country to a bigger level by
He
having
he
the
he
rock
he
show.
took he played country music, but put on a rock show.
he is the second best concert I've seen in my life.
Yeah.
He was amazing, and that was about 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Oh, excellent. What I was going to say here is I like that we're getting these 4 extra tracks on here.
Yeah.
Or the Dawn is a kick-ass track, and we got
Oh, it's so good.
it really is, and we got a wicked version of Future Tense on here, and that guitar interplay on that is wonderful.
Before the Dawn is Brian Greenway was a perfectly great singer on his own. And I wish he'd gotten more lead vocals on some of these albums. But Before the Dawn is generally considered to be, yeah, we love it when he would step up and sing that song. It's just that's another just because these cool ups and downs. Future Tense is such a heavy riff for April Wine. I mean, it's got that. Yeah, it's really cool. This is a great version of it. Yeah, I was really pleasantly surprised to see those two songs added. But again, I mean, here they are. This was supposed to be, I know it was their farewell tour, but it was also supposed to be the Animal Grace tour. And of the 15 songs on the deluxe version, we've got one, two, three, four. I guess we got 4 songs from Nature of the Beast. But
Yes.
yeah, uh, definitely well represented. But yeah, Future Tense is the only one that's I think Future Tense might be the heaviest song, but I don't know. Crash and Burn comes close because that's borderline early thrash.
Yeah, that's true. No doubt about it. One thing I you brought up, and now I have this down as something I'd like to discuss. Early on with the band, you had Miles sharing vocals with Jim Henman, Richie Henman. Then
Yeah,
later on, in a later version, you had Jim Clench there.
yeah,
Then when Brian Greenway comes in the band, he's singing 2 songs from Harder, Faster. So then we go to Nature the Beast, and now it's all Miles. Do you think this is a band decision, or do you think this is a record company decision? Because their momentum is building, and Miles
I think
tracks.
there, there's something about that it might be a record company decision because if you notice, he also sang the song Right Down to It on First Glance.
Yes,
But that's it. Yeah, you're right. The next time he sang a lead on an April Wine album wasn't until it wasn't until 2001. They put a great album out called Back to the Mansion. He sings
yes,
2 songs on there. Holiday, which is a fantastic song. The other one is going to go out of my head, and it just did. It's gone. Holiday is the best one of the two. But anyway, he put out a solo album in 1988 on Atlantic Records called Serious Business. And I think he sang all the songs, and he's got some big players on there. Alex Lifeson plays a solo. I think Aldo Nova's on it. But anyway, that's beside the point. But I think it might have been a record company decision just to promote one guy as the
right.
front man and the singer. That happened a lot. I mean, um, and, and I don't know why it happened, but it's certainly like you look at the Kiss videos in the 80s, it's all Paul songs.
All Paul songs, yes.
Now, mind you, Paul was bringing in the better songs at that
Okay.
time for the most part, but
You think of
they
movies.
they definitely were promoting him as the front man. Um, Look at Y&T. I mean, in the early days of Y&T, Phil Kennemore co-sang a lot of the songs.
Good.
Leonard Hayes sang a song or two. But by the time they signed with A&M, it was all Dave Menichetti, and that's it. You know, we don't want to have a bunch of people singing, which doesn't make any sense to me because that never hurt Toto, and it never hurt Fleetwood Mac, to have these different people sing. It didn't hurt Triumph, but explain that to a record label, right? Even when you think about it, some of it was just the serendipity of somebody leaving. But when Greg Raleigh left Journey, Steve Perry was the singer, and that was it.
Right.
And I really like that interplay between Steve Perry and Greg Raleigh. But
There's some of my favorite songs by Journey are those songs.
yeah,
Did you
so
notice?
I think that might have been why. That might have been why. It's like, no, this guy's writing the songs. He's going to sing the songs.
Right. Because they want to focus on one person in the band,
Yeah,
especially if you're going into the video age.
yeah.
So did you on the One for the Road copy do you have? Did you notice the song that was written here twice? Like a lover, like a song, where this could be the right one was.
I do. Yeah.
Yeah, they made a boo-boo on that.
Oh,
They haven't
yeah,
released
that's right. So does
original
that
11.
mean that we're, um, hold on. Does that mean we're missing something?
No, no, well, we're track 11 is where it says like a lover, like a song. That should be this could be the right one, but they made a boo-boo.
Oh, right. There. Okay. Yeah. I noticed it, but I forgot about it. And now you reminded me. So, yeah. Again, they deserve better.
They do deserve
Their
better.
catalog deserves better.
And that's another thing I think about too. If they had put this out in the States in 85, we had a very successful live album by the Kinks in 1981 called One for the Road.
Yeah.
So why would you go with that title so soon after a platinum after an album? I think it went platinum for the Kinks. That was the Kinks when they got big again, when they
Right.
went to an arena rock sound. That's another thing
Well,
one did.
it's a common expression, right? We'll have one for the road, or
That's true.
I mean, Leonard Skinner had one more from the road, right? And then
Exactly.
more something was scratched out or something. I don't think that was as big a deal, but it might have helped if it had come out because people would have picked it up and go, I know that song, and I know that song, and I know that song. But you know, live albums just weren't a big deal in the 80s like they were in the 70s. There were a few exceptions, right? Like Live After Death and Scorpions Worldwide Live, but for the most part, they weren't events the way that they were in the 70s. Like bands, I can't think of I don't think there were any band in the 80s that broke off of a live album.
No, no, it was mostly a like a 70s phenomenon.
Yeah. And that's why also you notice that a lot of the live albums that did come out in the 80s, they were just singles. Like this one, like Y&T's Open Fire. It's like the record label didn't have enough faith that they could do it, sell a lot of double album or sell a double set. But
They were
I don't know.
selling the video, is what
Yeah.
because if you think about it, like, and I was talking about this on Bicycle Legs Talks Music with Daniel, U2 Under a Blood Red Sky was released after War, and War was
Hmm.
their first platinum album in the States. That was actually an EP.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah. In that Red Rocks concert, that was Much Music used to play that a lot and play different clips from it, right? That was a big turning point for you too, I think.
I thought so too, because we got it MTV in 84, and they would always play that clip for Someday Bloody Sunday, even though there was only one song from Red Rocks on Under a Blood Red Sky. They would always play that clip on MTV.
Between that and the cover, you just figured, oh, this must be the audio version of that.
Exactly, but it was
Yeah.
actually recorded in three different venues, but there was only
Yep.
one song from
Much
that.
Music always played that. Obviously, Sunday Bloody Sunday was the most popular one. I mean, for
Yes.
lack of a better word, that was the video for that song.
Mhm.
But they also played I Will Follow. And sometimes they played the 11 o'clock TikTok clip too. Yeah.
I vaguely remember hearing that, seeing that back in the day too. What do you think of this long drum solo after Ooh on a Night? It sounds like
So,
it sounds like it was just spliced in.
yeah, and I've seen April Wine so many times. Jerry Mercer would do essentially the same solo, even on that first live album from '74. And it's cool. Every time he would do this thing where you can hear him go like he just hit, but then he would get gradually faster and bring his other hand into it, but you couldn't tell when he was starting to alternate hands, and he'd get really fast. Um, and that was his solo. I mean, that was his trademark drum solo. Like Neil Peart would do the cowbells and
Yes.
all of that. Like that was Jerry's solo, but it would always be like a little over halfway through. And I don't ever remember him doing it after What a Night. I think it was spliced in too.
Yeah, and it's weird to if you're just coming into this blind, you would think to yourself, why is there a drum solo near the end of the
Yeah.
album?
Because I don't think it's on the album. I don't think it's on the record of the cassette.
Oh,
I
okay.
don't think so. I don't think because What a Night is not on the record or cassette.
Right. Yeah, so you wouldn't have that drum
He
solo.
certainly wouldn't do it before Roller. So yeah, I would say you got a spliced in situation here.
Yeah, exactly. What do you think of the sound quality?
It sounds like it was. recorded live. It doesn't sound like there was a lot of sweetening done to it. As a matter of fact, there's an error in it. I've always picked up on this. Um, I think it's the first chorus, if this could be the right one. Jerry misses the snare
Oh, okay.
because it should be this could be the right one. This could like he's hitting a hi-hat or something. There's a snare missing.
Oh, okay.
I think,
I don't know the song
and
that
it
well to
seems to
know it.
me that that would be an easy fix. Well, where it would just
That's
go
true.
but like it's missing.
Hmm.
Um, it's like he's doing a fill and doesn't get back in time. I don't know. That's what it sounds like to me anyway. Either way, it would sound like something that you'd listen and go, let's just fly a snare in there and they didn't.
Yeah,
So that's interesting.
it is. Yeah, so that would give more credence to the fact that this was not a live album
This,
done in the
yeah,
studio.
it sounds warts and all to me.
There you go. Very good. And as I mentioned before, or we mentioned it, you can't go wrong with this track listing here. You're hitting all the high points of those four albums, and you're getting two songs from their early days, which were one should have been a huge hit, and the other one was a huge hit in Who What a Night. So,
Yeah,
Tim, how would you rank One for the Road from 1 to 10?
I'd give it a nine.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd give it a nine. I wish it was a double record. Uh, I've seen April Wine enough times to know they played more songs than that. Although I did see them later on in their career and they did start to shorten the sets, but they were getting older. And
Right.
Miles always had a lot of health issues. Miles was a lifelong diabetic, and it eventually
Yes.
got him,
Mhm.
unfortunately. But I remember when I saw them, the first time I saw them was in 1994. Still, probably the loudest concert I've ever been to because they were bringing these huge refrigerator-size amps into this tiny,
Uh,
tiny, tiny little club. We all had tinnitus for days. But anyway, great show. I just this is the time there was no I had no means of getting this out to people, so I never wrote the set list down. It just seemed like they played a lot of songs.
good. I give us an 8.5. I think the sound quality is very good. I like the interplay on here. I like the warts and all feel. I like that they're hitting all the high points on those albums, and we're still getting a couple songs from the earlier days when they were much, much bigger in Canada. The drum solo I could do without that, but I would have Who What a Night near the end. I mean, that makes sense. And 21st Century Schizoid Man, and which by the way, I think they do a very strong cover of that. I something
I
I mentioned before.
it's funny. I didn't know that song. Like I didn't know King Crimson. When I first got the comp, All the Rockers that I talked about, that was the first time I heard that song. And I'm like, what's with the vocal? Like who's singing? Like this is really weird. I'm like, what a weird song for them. And then I read that it was a cover and it made a little bit more sense. And I grew to love it. Like I said, that first time I saw them in 94, they did this song. And man, oh man, they're still to this day one of the tightest bands I've ever seen. All of those
Yep.
stop on a dime live. You could hear a pin drop in between. No, no, they were locked in. And the funny thing is that by 1994, Jim Clench was back. Steve Lang did not come back when they
Okay.
reunited. And I remember thinking to myself, I bet you when he rejoined, oh man, you're not going to make me learn this, are you? But they nailed it. It was so good.
Absolutely. I mean, that just speaks volumes about their musicianship. They're taking a King Crimson song, and King Crimson are some of the finest musicians out there, and they got all that down. It was a very strong version.
And
But
they made it all guitars.
yes, they
Like
did.
I just love I love their version of that song. It's um I eventually I listened to the King Crimson version. I'm like, that's interesting, but I'm so used to the April Wine one.
Right. Exactly. So I give this an 8.5, just for reasons that we talked about. Very strong set list. Band are very, very tight. Miles sounds very good on lead vocals, as does Brian on the two tracks that he hits. This is April Wine, One for the Road. So, to all of you who've been watching, thank you so much for joining us today. What do you think of April Wine's music? And look at that vinyl on the back, which has a lot more pictures and information than we have on the CD.
The other cool thing about it, this is the but the other cool thing about it's actually got the lyrics,
Oh, okay.
which is not typical. And the vinyl itself, it's not customized. It's just that's typically what Aquarius record albums look like. A lot of the April Wine albums look like that.
Good.
But yeah, it's got all the lyrics to the songs, which is
That's
kind of
awesome.
weird.
Yeah, you don't
Yeah,
see it on a live album.
on live albums, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So, what do you think of April Wine's music? And have you heard One for the Road? Have you ever seen April Wine live? Particularly if you're watching from Canada, where April Wine is an institution. What are your favorite songs by April Wine? Please let us know in the comments what you think of April Wine and their live album, One for the Road. Tim, thank you so much for joining me today and suggesting this live album that I did not know exists, and one that a lot of people should hear. April Wine, One for the Road. So, Tim, what do you have going on Tim's Final Confessions?
The Fleetwood Mac deep dive is continuing. I've got a couple of very cool Thank you. I've got a couple of very cool interviews coming up with someone who actually worked with Fleetwood Mac. I've not announced that anywhere else, but it's coming. And I also had the was fortunate to talk with someone who um, worked at KLOS in Los Angeles, and also worked as a promotions person for Columbia Records, and worked for the legendary manager David Krebs. And I've got three different interviews coming up, or three different episodes based on the chat that we had coming up. And yeah, just all my books are on Amazon, and just continuing to pump those, and three new episodes every week. And thank everybody for the support.
You got it. Please check out Tim's Vinyl Confessions. He always has a wealth of material out. He's been putting out the weekly Fleetwood Mac series, but there's always a lot of great stuff on there. He talks about top 10s from yesteryear, which is really interesting because you hear, oh, I'm sorry, those top 40s from yesteryear, because you're like, wow, I forgot all about that song at number 27 because you haven't heard it since
I
19.
love it. Yeah, I love doing the chart episodes. Yeah, those are great.
Yeah, they certainly are. Thank you so much for joining us today. Do what you love, and we'll talk to you soon.